So in 2017, Ashley, you were living in New York, working in the hospitality event industry. And kind of as the story goes, you attended a networking event, or an event, and the networking portion was find someone, they've got a button on their name tag, same color as yours, go talk to them. Not surprisingly, she ended up having lunch with her phone instead of any of the people at the event. And then that night, when you were talking to your mom, coincidentally, Kerry had a similar experience at a networking event that wasn't effective, didn't result in any connections. And so you guys talked for 4 hours. What happened after that 4-hour conversation?
Yeah, well, first of all, good morning, everybody. It's good to be here.
Good morning.
First of all, it was actually in 2014.
Yeah.
2014. No, you're good. So we've been in this grind for a hot second.
Yeah.
We don't have any generations of entrepreneurs in our family, so no one's even ever owned a restaurant in our family. We all went to college and got a job, and the idea is you just work and work and work and grow up the ladder and do that. We were doing that, but then this problem came about, and we looked for a solve, and when there wasn't one, we were like, oh, let's be very logical. Let's build it, and with no tech background.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people always ask this question, like, how do you get started? We speak to entrepreneurs often, and the biggest advice we give them is go to the Google. Like, the Google will tell you everything you need to know. Like, there are so many resources for you to figure it out. It's just a matter of putting the work in and digging. And so we started to dig, and we started to, we wanted to check and see, is anybody doing this? Is anybody solving this problem the way that we're talking about? And nobody was.
And Mixed Rose was born.
That's it.
Kind of like you were born.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
So give us a little bit of idea. So you're in Nashville. You're still in New York.
Yep.
It's 2014. In 2015, Kerry, you go to CES, right?
Yes.
Kind of explain the path that got you there and how that was a pivotal moment for the company.
Yeah, so, I mean, we made up this crazy idea on November the 14th.
November 9th.
November the 9th of 14. And Ashley came home for Christmas, and we were like, okay, we're going to get this developed, whatever that is. And she ran across CES, which I didn't even know what it was. So I was very corporate. And the event was going to be in a week. And I said, hey, I'm going to go to that. And she's like, Mom, you are not going to that in this environment by yourself. I'm like, yes, I am. So I went to Vegas, saw the Mercedes driving around the street by itself. And
can I just side note and say, CES is a consumer electronics show. It's in Las Vegas, like the biggest electronics show there is. It kicks off the year. I told her not to go because I was like, you're going to be like a fish out of water. And she was like, no, I'll be fine. So, like, she went there from Nashville with cowboy boots. And I was like, relax. Relax.
Well, it worked because I actually met our developers at that event, which was a spectacular meeting. And they've been with us ever since. And so, you have to teach yourself. The deal was this: if we wanted to be in technology, we don't have to necessarily be technologists, but we need to understand the game. So when we first, I was hearing people say racks, and I was thinking ribs, and then it took me a minute to catch on. I was like, yeah, don't put sauce on mine. But I mean, it was all about.
We used to call Ruby on Rails Emerald on Green.
Yeah.
Still to this day,
Yeah.
our developers are like, y'all are nuts. But
Yeah.
we figured it out.
We figured it out.
Great. So you're at CES. You find a development team to help develop the product. You come back to Nashville, and you're still in New York, right?
Yes.
So how is that working? Like, what's going on in terms of how you're growing that business, and give us an idea of what's the next big step.
So what's interesting about this time in 2015 is I was living and working in New York, and a little bit of background on us. My mom was an HR executive. She was actually taking a sabbatical, so my mom was actually full-time on Mixed Rose the whole time. So without her, and I feel like she'll get dinged on this a lot, like people will be like, oh my gosh, you're not a millennial. And I'm like, right, she's my mom, so she's not a millennial.
I'm just a little bit out of being a millennial.
But...
millennial plus. That's me. Yeah.
The one thing that I'll say about that is I tell this to entrepreneurs all the time. I'm like, man, if you can find you a woman over 40 to be on your team, I was like, recruit them immediately. And the reason is because they grew up, came about in this time where there was no Me Too. None of that was happening. It was like you were supposed to, if you were working, you were going to go to work, then you were going to come home and take care of the whole household. There was no like equitable of the work, and you had to figure it out. And my mom being an executive, like when I was a kid, I have vivid memories of her like with a book in her lap at like clarinet recitals because she was getting her master's degree. So all of that was like seeping in on me slowly. And so I tell people, I'm like, my mom is like Netflix. She keeps iterating, and she's not like Blockbuster. She ain't never going nowhere. So, that's the one thing I'll say about that. But then as far as my background, I was in event production in New York City. My big claim to fame is I was LeBron James' first intern for 3 years. And then I moved to New York, and I became an event producer. And I mention this because as we were starting this company, I was also working on the biggest event of my career, which was Moet Hennessy's 250th anniversary. And so it was kind of a disaster. My mom would be working on mixtros. She was in Nashville kind of laying the track, getting in the ecosystem, trying to figure out who the players were, all of that, using that corporate expertise. And then she would work on mixtros all day, and then I would get home like 9 p.m., and I would work on mixtros from like 10 to 3 a.m., and then she would wake up and have a flurry of emails from me, and then we would start over again. And we did this for a while. Yeah, a while.
That's incredible. It's sort of like you had an offshore.
Kind of.
24 hours. So, Kerry, you in 2015 were diagnosed with breast cancer, right? Can you tell us a little bit, kind of, obviously you're working 24/7 on the business. It was probably
it's one of those.
And how did that impact the trajectory of
it's one of those things that no matter what you're doing, life happens. And so I didn't have any symptoms. I was actually flying out to meet Ashley at a conference, went to an exam, and I found out I had breast cancer, but I also had just raised $200,000 from our friends and family, and Ashley was also considering moving, and, you know, my husband was getting used to no checks in the bank, and it was like, I can't stop. And so I look at that point in life, and, you know, I'm good. I got my necklace on, and everything is good, so I'm great. But I look at that, 3 months of being diagnosed, having surgery, I did a little sun tanning.
Pause on that. She literally used to call me on the way to mixtros things and say, hey, I'm on my way to tanning. And I didn't handle this cancer thing very well. I was crying all the time and whatnot. And I was like, you're not going to tanning. I was like, you're black, stop.
Radiation. But I truly say, even in that part of my life, between my family, my faith, my family, my friends, and focusing on mixtros, I literally went into surgery talking to my surgeon on, when I wake up, I'm going to tell you how you can use this at the AMA. And so, that's that. Life happens.
Yeah.
And that is where a hustle that just does not stop comes from. Trying to sell before you're put under for surgery. So obviously you survived, went through the radiation, and for you, Ashley, that was kind of a turning point. And also, give us an idea of how you got to Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is the next part of their journey.
Yeah.
They were working on the idea, and I want you to give the audience a little bit of a picture of sort of where you were in terms of getting customers and how Chattanooga comes into play.
Yeah, so 2016, I was still working in New York, we were still doing this kind of back and forth situation. But in March, so my mom finished radiation on February 12th. Let's see, I know this, February 12th of 2016. And so on March 5th, which is my stepfather's birthday, we got our first paid event. So like somebody paid us $250 to use mixtros, and we were freaking out. We were like, oh my gosh. We were like, this is it. This is amazing. And so I flew home for this, and we go to this event, and we're like, okay, so what time are you going to do the mix? You're going to do it over lunch? When are you going to do it? And they said, we're going to do it at the end of the day. And we were like, no, because it was the first nice Saturday in Nashville. It was like 80 degrees outside. People would have been in a conference from like 9 to 5. We were like, oh, nobody's going to stay for this. But in fact, what ended up happening is people stayed, they did their mix, and they stayed in their groupings for so long, the venue turned off the lights. And we were like, Oh, yeah. We were like, okay, we got something here.
Yeah.
So between that moment and my mom, watching this woman go through this cancer diagnosis and stay positive and keep pushing this business forward, I was like, all right, there's not really such a thing as a half-time entrepreneur. So, like, get in or get out. So then it was get out, move. I moved from New York, and I was living a lovely life in New York. And we both went from well over 6 figures, and I think I was making like $1,000 a month. Like, I was like, I didn't know what to do with myself. I moved into my brother's room.
A very nice room.
A nice room.
Nice.
I got his old beat up car, and we went to work. And so while we were at that conference where we did our first event, this gentleman walked past us. His name is Cordell Carter.
Yeah.
He is at the Aspen Institute now, but he's from Chattanooga. And he said, what is it that you guys are doing? And so we were explaining. And I'll always remember, we had 2 guys with us who were just helping us that day, friends of ours. And they had on mixed rose shirts. And everyone went up to the men and said, tell us about your company. Yeah. And they would be like, actually, bing, those 2. Yeah. And the people would be like, not the old one. And this guy, though, he was just like, you know what? He was like, I like what you're doing. I'm going to make a connection for you. He was like the first person in our journey who said he was going to do something, and he followed through. And I'm telling you, of all the things that we could say on the stage, like, that is the utmost important. Like, if you going to say it, do it, or don't say it. So, he did that. We ended up getting into an accelerator in Chattanooga called Gig Tank. I know our folks are here.
Shout out.
Yeah.
Marcus.
But the funny thing, right, where I was like, where he at? Yeah, there he is. But the funny thing about that is that really got us to put some polish on what we were saying. It enabled us to be able to talk about our business in another way. We had to learn that. The funny thing, though, is we moved from Nashville to Chattanooga. The reason we moved from Nashville is we just kept hearing over and over, you're a black woman in the South, not happening for you. And we were like, okay.
I was like, give me something to work with. Okay?
Yeah, I was like, okay. I was like, we can't change any of that. So we went to Chattanooga. We lived in a dorm together for the summer, which was awesome.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah. And then we came out swinging. After we came out from that accelerator, we made some really quick revenue. We worked with clients like Deloitte and Vanderbilt to test the product, and we kept going.
Awesome, yeah. So you were in Chattanooga at Gig Tank the summer of 2016.
Yeah.
And then you go back to Nashville. You go back on a high, you've got revenue, you've got a good MVP, you've got a plan. What faced you when you got back?
It was the same thing. And so the whole time, my husband is holding it down in Nashville, actually, in Franklin. So we're going back and forth, and we did feel like we were equipped. Ashley is here now full time. People are starting to recognize us. I was on the board of the Nashville Technology Council, and Ashley is still on the Nashville Entrepreneur Council's board. And it was just like, oh, it's going flat again. So what I say often is, it takes more than people clapping and accolades. If an ecosystem is going to grow, a very wise man, his name is John Hudson, and he's a senior vice president at Alabama Power. He got in front of a group and he said, you either need to be an investor or a client. At the end of the day, if entrepreneurs do not have that revenue coming in or the capital, they can't exist. Nashville didn't do that for us. Now, did we meet some lovely people along the way? Dr. Fallon Wilson is over here, and that was more than enough reason to be in Nashville alone. And our personal friends, we raised $200,000 in Nashville from our personal networks there and outside of Nashville, but Nashville wasn't filling us. And had we stayed there, I'd probably be back in a corporate role or working for Ashley. Like, could you give me a job? And she would be back doing her thing.
So you're, doing your thing. You're going to conferences, pitch events, and I know in 17 there was one that was particularly pivotal. You guys went down to Collision in New Orleans, right?
So I'm going to give you guys the Reader's Digest version of what happened in 2017, because that's when things started to get really interesting. So 2017, we go to Collision Conference. I'm sure a lot of y'all are familiar with Collision. Has moved to Canada. Let's not talk about it. And we're going to this conference, and we notice whenever we go to a tech conference, like people would walk up to Kerry. This is like not a joke. They would walk up to her and be like, "Ma'am, gin and tonic," and I'd be like, "Oh my God!" I was like,
and
oh
they
my God.
honestly, they didn't realize I used to negotiate for Ford for a living. I'm like, are you talking to me? And so it never went well.
It never went well. And so for this conference, we were like, you know what? We're going to make a T-shirt so everybody knows what we're doing there. So we get this little T-shirt made, and it says, Black Female Founder Fund Me, and on the back it says, Got Seed. Okay. This is $12 we spent on the T-shirt. Our neighbor actually does the little T-shirt letterpress, and she made them for us the night before this conference. So we go to Collision Conference, wear these T-shirts, and people lost their mind. Like, they lost their mind. People, like white males, we had a group, several groups come up and say, why are you wearing that T-shirt? What if I wore a T-shirt like that? And I was like, but you're already getting the money. You don't need a T-shirt. What are we talking about? Three very significant things happened to us over the course of that conference. So one, we ended up getting our first article in Forbes, which was pretty cool. A reporter was there, had no idea what publication she was with, and she was like, I like this. And I was like, okay, great. So that was great. Another thing is we collided with an organization called Creative Startups. They were out of Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Woo-hoo. Mama sits on the board now.
Yeah, Kerry's on the board now. They invited us to a pitch competition in Albuquerque. We went there, we won that pitch competition, and then they sent us to Copenhagen, and we won that one too. So that was pretty cool. And then finally, and this is the piece, we met this woman, and her name is Beth McKeon, and she was just kind of understated, like around the conference, and she was just like, I like what you're doing. She was like, I'm gonna follow you on Facebook. We were like, yeah.
Oh, there Beth is.
I know she's there. I saw her.
I didn't see her.
So I saw her, like, I'll tell you in a minute, I'm mildly scared of her, but, we meet her, and then several months later, she sends us a note, and she says, hey, she was like, I am executive director of a program called Velocity. It's in Birmingham. You guys should apply. And I said, Kerry, we're applying. We're about to move to the UK. Let's go. And that wasn't it.
She really did.
Yeah, that wasn't it. So Birmingham, Alabama, which is only 2.5 hours down one road from Nashville. We applied, we got in, and our life changed. Wait, Sister Wilson, all right, that's it. And this is why our life changed. We spent 3 years in Nashville trying to make this work, grinding, hustling, all that. 1 year in Birmingham, we completed Velocity Accelerator from January to April of 2018.
That's where we got scared of.
That's where we got scared of her. I'm telling you, she knows what she's doing.
Y'all need to talk to her.
She had me running across the street like, don't be late. So anyway, so we did that. That accelerator gave us all the tools we needed. We got the grace to work on instead of in our business, and it was extraordinary. Like an executive MBA. Hats off to the Velocity program.
Hats off to Innovation Depot.
Woohoo.
Okay.
So we finished that program, and then Steve Case, Rise the Rest, comes through Birmingham. Had no idea what that was, but we applied. And so we go pitch Steve Case. I get off the stage, and he says, that was an amazing presentation. And we end up winning Rise of the Rest, $100,000 into a seed round. And then we raised the other 900,000 plus from Birmingham directly.
Alabama.
That's right, Birmingham, Alabama. And I want to say that because I know we're running short on time, but one thing I want to say about this, why this is so extraordinary, Birmingham was so close to where we were. My grandfather used to drive my mom as a child to Birmingham from Cleveland, Ohio.
Outside of Birmingham, but in Alabama.
But when he crossed the Mason-Dixon line, he used to put a gun on the dashboard because that's the time we were living in. And now we've gone on and we've become the 37th and 38th black females to close $1 million round of funding in Birmingham, Alabama. So yeah.
And one comment, I was talking to some of the funders in Birmingham, so I want to talk a little bit about that as well. Neil Wright from Bronze Valley, so organization that's investing kind of intentionally as part of this renaissance in Birmingham, said that when he talks about mixed roast, he's talking about, we've got this company we've invested in, and they just became the 37th and 38th black women to raise $1 million. And the response is, oh, cool, this year? And they're like, no, ever. So it's just an important kind of side note there that the disconnect is so large between the view of entrepreneurs raising capital and how hard it is for women and women of color, minorities. It's just
Old women. Yeah.
Older. I'm like, she
Yeah.
look good though. Older.
Yeah, I
is
do.
Good.
So tell us, I think we had talked a little bit about some of the things that you are experiencing in Birmingham as entrepreneurs and building your company in the ecosystem that this group, who's represents ecosystem builders from across the country, could potentially benefit from learning about, and especially as we put entrepreneurs front and center, your perspective of some of the things, the large things, small things.
I mean, I want to say the access to people, real access to people, and people not just doing it because it's nice. So I always tell entrepreneurs, you have to have a product, right, and somebody to buy it. So that's a given. But to be able to have the same access that our male counterparts and majority male counterparts have. And so we are able, because we hustle. We actually slept in the same bed. Like the college dorm was bad enough, but when we were in Velocity, I decided I'm over the money, thank God. And I was like, we're only going to get one bed. I got a whole house full of furniture down the road. And I thought it was a queen, but it was actually a full-size bed. And so we did that for
14 weeks, y'all.
Yeah. But I told her, we did it for 9 months. You never complained, so shut up. So, so just to be able to have that access, get real feedback, and I have to say one thing, which even to shout out Mayor Woodfin, he has created a climate where the government is working with the private and public sector. We have support from our fellow entrepreneurs, small businesses, big businesses alike.
But like, here's an example. So like Alabama Power, they're a force to be reckoned with down there, right? And so we were introduced to them early on. They have become a customer of Mixtros, repeat customer. Our client base with them is growing. But in fact, they really want to support entrepreneurs. So they actually are paying for our office space right now. And they did it very intentionally, because there's a co-working space in Birmingham. It's owned by a woman. They were like, great, we're going to stick Mixtros there, because that way we can support that woman and we can also support Mixtros. That is help. Yeah. Not just saying, you guys have a good product. I'm like, we know. Like, come on.
That's great. So I think next we'll kind of turn it to the audience, or your opportunity to talk to the audience. What we've talked about this a little bit, but as ecosystem builders, what do they need to know, kind of in your one or two pieces of advice to best serve entrepreneurs in their communities?
Yeah, I think if there's a Game of Thrones fan in the house, like, break the wheel, y'all. Like, break the wheel. And I say that to say, if you're not interested, if you're not going to be helpful, if whatever it is, the quicker an entrepreneur can figure out that your particular ecosystem is not the best ecosystem for them, the better. We spent 3 years, and you know why we were able to spend 3 years? Because we had money. That's the only reason why. We had built up some sort of personal wealth where we could afford, okay, you more than me. Okay, fine. Like, I was going to say, she bootstrapped, I sandal strapped. I know. But we had that. And what I didn't realize about entrepreneur, with the way the American dream is supposed to be, it's like you come up with an idea and you should be able to see this. You should be able to see it forward. Entrepreneurship today is a sport for the elite. If you're not elite, you can't do it. And that shouldn't be so. And when we figure out a way to make that not the reality, things will be so much better. But honestly, the worst thing you can do for an entrepreneur is tell them that you're going to do something and then not follow through, and then make them feel terrible for continuing to follow up. We're entrepreneurs. We only see one lane to get to where we're going next. So just be mindful of that as you're coming across people, as people are talking to you, because the sooner that person can figure out, you know what, maybe it's not Nashville, maybe it's Chattanooga, maybe it's Birmingham, the better for them. Because honestly, grace is also getting out of a business before you sink life savings into it. So either one of those is a better option than just continuing to spin the wheel for someone.
And I have to say this, and really to shout out Beth and what she's doing with Fluent. The other thing that I think is very important, everybody has to have the same vernacular. The entrepreneurs need to understand what their value is in their startup and what their expectations should be from an investor. But on the investor side, they need to understand what a startup is. I can't tell you how many times when we were generating $250 every other month, somebody would say, "What's your EBITDA?" I'm like, what? I'm a startup. And so that's one of the bridges that Beth is building on, trying to get everybody speaking at the same thing. It's kind of like a FICO score. We all know an 800 is awesome, and I know what an 800 will get me in the world, and so does a potential creditor, and it works that same way with entrepreneurs and investors.
Yeah.
Awesome. Those are great pieces of advice. I know it's been recorded. I hope you wrote some of that down. Now's the time. I'm going to ask you, what can we, as this community, these ecosystem builders, entrepreneurs, funders, this is a pretty diverse group, what can we do to help you, help Mixtros?
Yeah, I mean, you saw it yesterday, which was pretty cool. I'm so sad that I missed it. So let me just say, the cool thing about yesterday was the reason I wasn't here is because I was exhibiting Mixtros at Biz Bash in Fort Lauderdale, which was pretty awesome. So it's amazing what happens when you get some capital in your business. You can go do all these things and garner clients and all this kind of thing. So for us, I mean, work with us. We would love to work with you. We would love to help your ecosystems feel more connected, be more connected, unlock some of those synergies that we helped to do yesterday. So, I mean, really, it's that. It's like, work with us. That's the best thing that you could do for a startup. Tell someone about us. Be like, I saw this cool thing. You should check it out.
Yeah, and I have to say, because I sell even in surgery, the data that the Kaufman Foundation gets on the back end, which you guys didn't see. So you had the benefit of the connectivity. The foundation gets all of the data on the back end. So really, it's about, she said it nicely, I'm an OG. It's about client acquisition. So we are
That's
looking
why I
to,
have her on the team.
Yeah, so we're looking for client acquisition. But this is lovely, and this whole experience has been great.
Well, the pretty cool thing on the Mixtros website is they describe the product as Mixtros creates community by increasing engagement and collecting data. And if you were here yesterday when we were talking about the goals, that's goal 4 and 5. So it's pretty rare and incredible that we've got a group of entrepreneurs, a company that has been doing this going on 6 years now, and it speaks to exactly what we're doing here. So I'm really excited for this opportunity to have this chat with you.